They say betrayal cuts deeper than any knife. But what if the person who betrayed you wasn't just someone you loved, but someone you trusted with your entire life? This is a shocking, real-life story of popular football coach murders his wife after discovering scandalous affair. A case that shook the world of college football and left a trail of destruction no one saw coming. Jack Riggins had it all. Fame, power, respect. He wasn't just a football coach, he was a legend. A man who built champions, a man who turned struggling athletes into superstars. Fans adored him. Players feared him. The media idolized him. And at home, he was married to Vanessa Riggins, a woman who, at least from the outside, had the perfect life, the glamorous, devoted wife of a football icon. But behind the curtain of that perfect marriage, there were secrets. Big ones. Because while Jack was out shaping the future of college football, Vanessa was falling for someone else. And not just anyone. She was having an affair with one of Jack's own players. Before we jump into this incredible story, take a moment to comment below where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping true crime stories that will leave a lasting impression. Your support helps us bring these powerful cases to light. Now, let's dive in to the outside world. Jack Riggins was more than just a football coach. He was a legend, a man who had dedicated his entire life to the game, transforming young athletes into champions, turning underdogs into stars, and building a legacy that seemed untouchable. On game days, you'd see him on the sidelines, pacing back and forth, barking orders, his mind calculating every possible move. Because winning wasn't just an option. It was the only way. But when the final whistle blew, Jack wasn't just a coach. He was a husband, a father, a man with a picture-perfect life. Or so it seemed. His wife, Vanessa Riggins, was the kind of woman who turned heads the moment she walked into a room. Charismatic, elegant, effortlessly beautiful, she was the ultimate coach's wife. Always dressed impeccably, smiling for the cameras, supporting Jack at every game, every event, every celebration. She was his greatest cheerleader. But behind that dazzling smile, behind the perfectly curated image of the Riggins marriage, was a woman who was slowly suffocating. Because the truth was, Vanessa was bored. Years of playing the role of the devoted wife had left her feeling empty, unfulfilled. Jack was married to the game more than he was to her. Football came first, always. And Vanessa? She was just another piece of the puzzle, another part of his well-managed public persona. But everything changed when Jack started talking about a young man named Damian Carter. Damian wasn't just any player. He was special. A natural-born athlete with lightning-fast reflexes, a cannon for an arm, and the kind of raw talent that scouts drooled over. Jack saw something in him, something rare. And when Jack saw potential, he nurtured it. He took Damian under his wing, trained him, pushed him to his limits, but more than that, he treated him like family. He brought him home after practices, let him sit at the dinner table, spoke about him with admiration. Sometimes even more than he spoke about his own son. And Vanessa noticed. At first it was just a passing curiosity. She listened as Jack raved about Damian's skills, how he had the potential to go pro, how he was going to change the future of the team. But then, curiosity turned into fascination, because Damian wasn't just talented. He was young, charismatic, confident, everything that Jack used to be when they first fell in love. And the more Jack praised him, the more Vanessa paid attention. She started watching the games more closely, not for Jack, but for Damian. She noticed the way he moved, the way he carried himself. He wasn't just an athlete. He was magnetic, a rising star with the world at his feet. And the more time Damian spent at their home, the more Vanessa felt something she hadn't felt in years: excitement. Jack, completely oblivious, continued to invite Damian over. He saw him as a brother, a son, a protege. But Vanessa, she saw him as something else entirely. And just like that, the first crack in the Riggins' perfect marriage began to form, a crack that would soon turn into a devastating fracture. A fracture that would lead to a crime so shocking it would leave the world speechless. It all started with admiration. Jack Riggins was not an easy man to impress. He had spent years coaching some of the best athletes in the game, molding raw talent into greatness. He had seen players come and go, each with their own ambitions, their own dreams of making it to the big leagues. But Damian Carter? He was different. From the very first time Jack saw Damian throw a football, he knew. This kid had something special. He had the kind of talent that didn't come around often, the kind that could change the future of a team. And Jack, being the mastermind that he was, knew exactly what to do. He took Damian under his wing, trained him, mentored him, pushed him harder than anyone else on the team, and it paid off. Game after game, Damian proved himself. He wasn't just good, he was exceptional. The kind of player that sports analysts predicted would go all the way to the NFL. Jack couldn't stop talking about him, at practice, in interviews, and most of all, at home. At the dinner table, he would go on and on about Damian's potential, his work ethic, his talent, how he had a natural leadership ability, how he reminded him of a young version of himself, how, if he kept his head down and stayed focused, he could be one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Vanessa listened. At first, it was just background noise, the usual football talk she had grown used to over the years. But something was different this time. Jack wasn't just talking about a player. He was admiring him, praising him, almost idolizing him, and that's when she became curious. She started watching the games more closely. Not for Jack, but for Damian. She watched the way he moved, the confidence in his step, the way he commanded the field. He was young, strong, and charismatic. And the way Jack spoke about him, it only made her more intrigued. And then Jack brought him home. At first it was casual, just a friendly dinner after practice, a way to build team camaraderie, but soon it became a regular thing. Damian was always around. Jack treated him like a little brother, always inviting him over, always making him feel like part of the family. He would pat him on the back, ruffle his hair like a proud father, joke about him being the son he never had. And Vanessa? She watched, she listened, she observed. At first it was harmless, a polite conversation here, a lingering glance there. But the more time they spent together, the more undeniable the chemistry became. Damian, in many ways, was everything Jack used to be, before football consumed him. He was passionate, driven, full of energy and ambition. He had a fire in him, a hunger for something greater, and Vanessa found herself drawn to that. One evening, after yet another dinner at the Riggins home, Jack went to his study to review game footage. Vanessa and Damian remained in the kitchen, finishing a bottle of wine. A laugh, a lingering touch, a spark, and from that moment on, there was no turning back. Jack had unknowingly brought Damian into their home, into their lives. But what he didn't realize was that he had also brought him into Vanessa's heart. And as Jack continued to mentor and guide Damian toward greatness, Vanessa was already slipping away. The admiration that started with Jack had now turned into something dangerous. And the consequences? They would be deadly. The affair started as stolen moments, quiet whispers, late-night texts, lingering touches. What had begun as a thrill soon spiraled into something uncontrollable. Vanessa and Damian were no longer just sneaking glances across the dinner table. They were finding ways to be alone. Secret rendezvous in hidden hotel rooms, passionate embraces in the dark corners of stadium hallways. A love affair that burned like wildfire, reckless and all-consuming. Jack had no idea, or at least that's what they thought. For months, Vanessa and Damian lived in their dangerous bubble, believing their secret was safe. They convinced themselves they were careful, that Jack was too busy with football to notice the shifts, the stolen glances, the nervous tension when Damian was around. The way Vanessa's touch had grown colder with her husband but burned with desire elsewhere. But Jack wasn't a fool. At first, the signs were subtle. Vanessa's sudden disinterest in his stories about Damian, the way she no longer rolled her eyes when he praised the young quarterback. Instead, there was a strange stillness, an eerie attentiveness. She listened too closely, paid too much attention, and then there were the little things. The late nights when she claimed she was out with friends, the faint smell of cologne on her when she came home, a scent that didn't belong to Jack. Then came the whispers, the hushed conversations that stopped when Jack entered the room, the exchanged glances between teammates, the rumors floating through the locker room, and finally the undeniable proof: Vanessa's phone, carelessly left on the kitchen counter, lighting up with a message from Damien. "I can't wait to see you tonight." Jack's world stopped. In that single moment, everything unraveled. Rage, humiliation, betrayal. It coursed through his veins like venom. Damien had been like a son to him, a brother, someone he had mentored, trusted, invited into his home. And Vanessa? She was his wife, the woman he had vowed to love and protect. They had both betrayed him, and they would pay for it. Jack didn't confront them immediately. No, that would be too easy, too merciful. Instead, he plotted, he planned. He let the anger simmer beneath the surface, masking his pain with forced smiles and cold indifference. Then he made his move. The fatal night. It was a warm Miami evening when Vanessa and Damien checked into the luxurious penthouse suite. A secret getaway, just the two of them. A night of passion, of reckless abandon, of the illusion that their love was untouchable. They had no idea it would be their last. The suite was perfect, expensive, isolated, overlooking the city skyline with floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed the room in a soft golden glow. Champagne chilled in a silver bucket, music played softly in the background. It was supposed to be a night to remember, and it was, just not in the way they expected. No one knows exactly what happened in those final moments. The only certainty was this. By morning, Vanessa and Damien were dead. Their bodies were found lying together on the pristine white sheets, their limbs entangled in a final, twisted embrace. At first glance, it looked like an overdose, a tragic accident, lovers caught in a dangerous game of indulgence. Empty wine glasses sat on the bedside table. A small vial of white powder rested on the floor. The scene was almost too perfect. When the police arrived, the initial assumption was simple: drugs. A night of excess gone terribly wrong. It happened all the time in Miami. Wealthy lovers, too much champagne, a little too much cocaine, and a deadly miscalculation. But not everyone was convinced. Detective Elise Carter had been on the force long enough to know when something didn't add up. And something about this crime scene felt staged, too clean, too precise. She studied the bodies, the positioning, the untouched glasses. She noted the lack of struggle, the eerie calmness of the room. Then there was the matter of the door. No forced entry, no sign of a break-in. Which meant one thing: whoever did this had been invited in, and there was one person who had every reason to want them dead. Jack Riggins, the husband, the mentor, the betrayed. A man who had spent his life controlling every move on the football field. Now he had executed his most calculated play yet. But had he covered his tracks well enough? Because the game wasn't over. Not yet. And Detective Carter? She was about to blow it wide open. Detective Elise Carter had seen it all. Homicides that were brutal, calculated, senseless. Crimes committed in the heat of passion, others meticulously planned. Killers who broke down in tears, overwhelmed by remorse, and those who sat cold and emotionless, their guilt hidden behind empty stares. But something about this case didn't sit right with her. The moment she stepped into that penthouse, she felt it in her gut. This wasn't just another overdose case. The details were too neat, too orchestrated. It wasn't just the bodies lying side by side like a tragic love story gone wrong. It wasn't just the expensive champagne, half-finished, or the faint trace of powder on the nightstand. It was the silence, the kind of silence that screamed deception. Elise had worked drug deaths before, and they were rarely this peaceful. Overdose scenes were messy, chaotic. Vomit, convulsions, panic. There was no sign of struggle here, no evidence that Vanessa or Damien had fought for their lives, just two beautiful corpses, frozen in an eerie stillness. Too perfect, too clean. And then there was the matter of the front door. No forced entry, no sign of a break-in. Whoever had done this had walked in without resistance. That meant one of two things. Either Vanessa and Damien had willingly let their killer inside, or the killer had access all along. Something gnawed at her, a feeling she couldn't shake, and Elise Carter had learned long ago: never ignore the feeling. The first clue: the toxicology report. The autopsies came back within days. At first glance, the toxicology report supported the overdose theory. Traces of sedatives and alcohol in both victims' systems. But there was something more, something crucial. The drug in their bloodstreams wasn't just any sedative. It was a powerful, fast-acting benzodiazepine, commonly used in high doses to render someone unconscious. Elise had seen it before, in cases of foul play. And then came the biggest revelation. Vanessa and Damien didn't just overdose. They had been drugged. This wasn't a case of reckless indulgence. This was premeditated. Someone had wanted them vulnerable, defenseless. And then there were the marks. Faint, almost imperceptible bruising on Damien's wrists, a small, nearly invisible abrasion near Vanessa's temple. Signs of struggle, of resistance. Subtle, but undeniable. Someone had been in that room with them. Someone who made sure they never walked out alive. Surveillance footage, the shadow in the night. Elise dug deeper. The penthouse was in an exclusive building, the kind where privacy was paramount. No public security cameras on the floor, no electronic key logs, no easy way to track visitors. But outside, the city never slept. Elise pulled traffic camera footage from the streets surrounding the hotel, searching for anything unusual, and then, there it was. A black SUV, parked near the building's entrance just after midnight, engine running, headlights off. The driver? A man who stepped out, his face obscured by the grainy footage. He lingered near the entrance, hands in his pockets, looking around before slipping inside. The timestamp placed him there the same night. Then another shot. This time, clearer. The man stepping out of the elevator in the lobby hours later, walking with purpose, his face momentarily visible before he disappeared into the night. Jack Riggins, the husband, the mentor, the man who had everything to lose. Elise stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't grief. This was premeditation, the breaking point, motive and witnesses. Elise had the suspicion. She had the inconsistencies. Now, she needed motive, and it didn't take long to find. Jack Riggins had discovered the affair. That much was clear. Elise uncovered messages between Vanessa and Damien, hidden in deleted files on Vanessa's recovered phone. Conversations filled with longing, secret plans, and, most importantly, a decision. A decision that would change everything. They were going to go public. No more sneaking around. No more secrets. Vanessa had written just days before her death. Jack will never forgive me, but I can't live a lie anymore. I want to be with you. Damien had replied. Then let's do it. No more hiding. Jack must have seen those messages. And once he did, the timeline aligned perfectly. Witnesses came forward. Players from Jack's team who had noticed his shift in demeanor, how he had become erratic, distracted, on edge, how he snapped at practice, yelled at staff, lost his famous composure. One of his assistant coaches recalled a conversation just 2 days before the murders. People like him don't deserve second chances, Jack had muttered under his breath after a loss. At the time, they thought he was talking about the game. Now, Elise knew better. Jack Riggins wasn't talking about football. He was talking about revenge. Elise Carter sat back in her chair, staring at the evidence sprawled across her desk. Jack thought he had committed the perfect crime, that he had staged the scene well enough to fool the world. But no crime was perfect, and she was going to prove it. The news hit like a thunderclap. At first it was just whispers. Rumors swirling in the shadows of the sports world, exchanged in hushed tones behind closed doors. But whispers soon turned into headlines, and headlines turned into an unstoppable storm. Within hours, every major sports network, every talk show, and every social media platform was ablaze. The scandal had everything: fame, infidelity, and the ultimate betrayal. It was the kind of story that didn't just make waves, it caused a tsunami. Jack Riggins wasn't just another coach. He was a titan, a legend, a man who had once been the face of integrity in the brutal world of professional sports. He had built champions, inspired young athletes, and earned the unwavering respect of fans and players alike. Now he was a murderer, a man who had let rage and heartbreak consume him, and the world couldn't look away. Some refused to believe it. His most loyal supporters, fans who had cheered for him through every victory, players who had once sworn by his leadership, clung desperately to the hope that it was all a mistake, that the media had twisted the story, that Jack was innocent. Jack Riggins is a good man. He's a mentor, a father figure. He's not a killer, one former player said in a press interview, his voice laced with disbelief. But others weren't so forgiving. He had everything: respect, power, a family, and he threw it away for revenge. a sports analyst declared on national television. This isn't just about a crime, this is about a man who let his emotions destroy him. He could have walked away, but instead he chose blood. The debate raged on. Was Jack a broken man who had snapped in a moment of unbearable betrayal? Or had he coldly planned the murder, his love for the game, and for himself, far greater than any love he had for his wife? For Vanessa's family, there was no debate. To them, Jack was a monster, a murderer who had not only taken their daughter, but had dragged her name through the mud in the process. Her mother, grief-stricken and furious, stood before the cameras, her voice trembling as she spoke. She was more than just the coach's wife. She was a daughter, a sister. She deserved better. And now all anyone wants to talk about is Jack, Jack's legacy, Jack's career. But what about Vanessa? What about her life? Tears streamed down her face as she clutched a framed photograph of Vanessa, smiling, vibrant, alive. We made mistakes, but she didn't deserve to die for them. Her father, usually a quiet man, had only one thing to say: "You'll pay for what he did, one way or another." And then there was Damien's family. His parents, devastated beyond words, refused to speak publicly, their grief too overwhelming. But his younger brother, barely holding back his rage, made his feelings known in a single, gut-wrenching statement. "Jack Riggins stole my brother's future, and he thinks he's the victim. He's a coward, a disgrace. I hope he rots." In the days following Jack's arrest, everything he had built came crashing down. The team immediately distanced themselves, scrubbing his name from their history as if he had never existed. His former colleagues, some of whom had once called him a genius, rushed to condemn him, afraid of being associated with his downfall. Sponsorships were pulled, contracts were cancelled. Networks that had once begged for his commentary now refused to even mention his name. His Hall of Fame induction, once considered a certainty, was now a distant, impossible dream. Jack Riggins was no longer a celebrated coach. He was a cautionary tale, a reminder that no matter how high you climb, one misstep, one moment of uncontrolled rage can send you plummeting into the abyss. As the trial loomed, the media frenzy only intensified. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. But Jack remained silent, until one day he agreed to a single interview. Sitting in the dimly lit confines of the prison visitation room, his face gaunt, his once proud posture now slumped with exhaustion, he finally spoke. "Rochu liked her. I trusted him, and they betrayed me." His voice was hollow, void of the fire that had once made him a legend on the field. "I lost everything that night. Not just my career, not just my freedom. I lost myself." He took a long, shaky breath before looking straight into the camera. "If I could go back, if I could change what happened, I would." For the first time he sounded like a man who truly understood what he had done. But it was too late. The world had already moved on. And Jack Riggins? He was just another fallen hero, swallowed whole by his own darkness. The courtroom was silent, not the kind of silence that brought peace, but the kind that suffocated, thick with anticipation and the weight of ruined lives. Cameras flashed, pens scratched against legal pads. The world was watching. Jack Riggins, once a titan of the football world, now sat at the defendant's table, stripped of the power and respect he had once commanded. His shoulders, once squared with confidence, now slumped under the crushing weight of what he had done. His suit, tailored to perfection, could not hide the wear of sleepless nights and relentless guilt. The state of Florida versus Jack Riggins had become one of the most sensationalized trials in recent history. Every sports analyst, every crime reporter, every true crime podcast had dissected the case from every angle. The headlines were relentless. The prosecution wasted no time painting Jack as a cold, calculating murderer. This was not a crime of passion. This was not a moment of blind rage. This was premeditated revenge, the prosecutor declared, his voice slicing through the tense atmosphere. He laid out the evidence with surgical precision. Motive? A trusted mentor betrayed by the two people closest to him. Opportunity? Jack was seen near the penthouse the night of the murders. Method? A staged overdose, meant to look like an accident but riddled with inconsistencies. Intent? The chilling texts found in Jack's phone, angry, vengeful messages never sent but drafted in the heat of his fury. Jack Riggins didn't just snap. He planned, he executed, and now he must face the consequences. Jack's defense team fought back, crafting a narrative of a broken man pushed to the edge. Jack Riggins is not a monster. He is a man who loved too deeply, who sacrificed everything for his family only to be repaid with the deepest betrayal imaginable, his attorney pleaded to the jury. They portrayed Jack as a devoted husband and mentor who had been emotionally shattered. They argued that when he walked into that penthouse, he wasn't thinking clearly. He wasn't Jack Riggins, the coach, the leader. He was a man in pain. It lost control. It was a moment of overwhelming grief, not a calculated act of murder. But the prosecution wasn't backing down. They reminded the jury that Jack had lived a life built on discipline, strategy, control. This was a man who spent years teaching athletes how to think under pressure, how to remain composed in the most intense situations. And yet, we are supposed to believe that a man who had spent his entire career mastering control suddenly lost it, that he was incapable of walking away. Jack, sitting there in the courtroom, barely reacted. The battle for his freedom raged on around him, but inside, he already knew the answer. Outside the courthouse, the scene was chaos. News vans lined the streets, protesters shouted, some demanding justice, others calling for leniency. Social media boiled with theories, debates, and armchair legal analysis. Jack Riggins is a victim of his emotions. This is a tragic case, not a murder case. If he wasn't famous, if he wasn't rich, he would have been convicted already. You can't let betrayal justify murder. I used to look up to Jack. Now, I don't even know who he is anymore. Everyone had an opinion, but only 12 people's opinions truly mattered. The jury deliberated for 3 days. 3 long days where the world stood still. Where Jack sat in his cell, replaying every moment that had led him here. Where Vanessa's family waited with bated breath, clutching each other's hands, praying for justice. Where Damien's younger brother stared at the floor, jaw clenched, refusing to shed another tear. And then, finally, the moment arrived. The courtroom filled once more, every breath held as the jury filed in, their faces unreadable. The judge turned to the foreperson. Has the jury reached a verdict? Yes, Your Honor. Jack exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around the edge of the table. The world was watching. On the charge of first-degree murder of Damien Carter, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Jack didn't move. He barely blinked. Of the charge of first-degree murder of Vanessa Riggins, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. A sharp cry erupted from Vanessa's mother. Damien's brother let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Jack closed his eyes. The gavel struck. Justice had been served, but at what cost? A once great man, now condemned. A young life cut short. A woman gone forever. There were no winners here. Only the echoes of what could have been. The courtroom is empty now. The cameras have shut off. The verdict has been delivered, but the story lingers. This case is more than just a headline, more than just another sensationalized tragedy. It is a haunting reminder that no matter how powerful, successful, or revered a person may be, they are still human, vulnerable to jealousy, anger, and the darkest corners of their own emotions. Jack Riggins was once a legend, a mentor, a man whose name was synonymous with discipline, leadership, and triumph. He built champions, he shaped futures. He was admired, respected, unstoppable. And yet he was brought down not by an opponent on the field, but by his own rage. By betrayal, by the cracks in his own foundation that no amount of success could reinforce. Was he always destined for this fall? Or did fate twist in ways even he couldn't have predicted? The tragedy of it all is not just Jack's demise, it is the lives lost in the wreckage. Vanessa Riggins and Damien Carter, 2 people who made their choices, who played their roles in this tangled, volatile affair, and who ultimately paid the price. 3 lives destroyed over love, trust, and deception. And for what? The echoes of this case will never fully fade. It will be dissected, debated, analyzed for years to come. But no matter how many theories arise, one chilling truth remains. This was never just about a crime. It was about the fragile, dangerous nature of the human heart. This case raises unsettling questions. Was Jack's downfall inevitable? Could he have prevented this if he had never trusted Damien? If he had simply walked away? Or was he always doomed to let his emotions consume him? We want to hear your thoughts. Let us know in the comments. What do you think? Could things have turned out differently? And if you love true crime stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Because the truth is always stranger than fiction.